Speaking of along for the ride, hey, North Carolina basketball, can I hold some? Can I hold a little cash? Got a little bit? You got a lot laying around. UNC basketball. Is it the thriller movie where you walk in with the suitcase full of cash and you just open it up and everybody's jaw drops? Because it feels like that's what's being reported was given to Hubert Davis for this year's UNC basketball team. Greg Barnes, Inside Carolina, put together an article, and the article has numbers, and that is what I have been chasing. Right? Everyone I talk to in the college basketball world, in the college sports world, football, basketball, whatever, the thing I want to see are numbers, right? Because you hear coaches going, the amount that these recruits are asking for is astronomical. It's crazy. It's outlandish. And I'm like, well, what are they asking for? I'm not going to name numbers. We're giving one of our starters, we're taking care of them. We're paying fair market price. I'm like, well, how much are you paying? They won't give numbers. Greg Barnes, Inside Carolina. I'll read directly from the article. Multiple sources have confirmed that UNC has surpassed the $14 million mark in its financial commitment to the 2025-2026 roster, approximately triple what was spent on the roster a year ago. The article, a separate part, men's basketball executive director and general manager Jim Tanner's $850,000 salary represents another bullet point in confirming the university's support of its prize program. Whoa! $14 million committed to this year's basketball roster. Now, again, we don't have numbers for everybody, but Jeff Goodman of the Field of 68 put this out. According to the report from Inside Carolina, UNC's payroll will be more than $14 million. Goodman says that would put the Tar Heels in the top 5 among men's basketball programs for this season, and maybe even as high as number 2 behind Kentucky, which is somewhere in the $20 million range. Even if they're wrong, as long as they're not grotesquely wrong, right? If you're saying their top 5 might be top 2, if they're top 15, this is the ultimate no excuse year for Hubert Davis. This is the ultimate no excuse year for the brain trust that is running UNC basketball right now. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I see one of a roster for UNC right now that makes sense as a top 5 highest priced roster in the entire country.
Right.
Kyan Evans, Jonathan Powell, Jaron Stevenson. They brought in some dudes. Caleb Williams, one of the top freshmen. I'm sure he wasn't cheap. Henry Vasar from Arizona, one of the top big guys. I'm not saying this is a cheap roster, but I don't see top 5. And if you have money spent to top 5 money, you should have roster ability to top 5 ability. That's how markets work, right? Pretend like I know how economics works, right? It just seems like if you spend, I'll use a example from my grandpa. If my grandpa got sent to the store by my grandma to get something, guess what he was getting? One step below the most expensive. Because he figured the most expensive had to be they're trying to rob you, right? That's a joke. But the next most expensive, that's got to be good, right?
You're still getting some quality with the second best.
Exactly. They're not trying to gyp me, but I don't want to come back with something bad. And that's just what he did, right? That's just what he did. So same is kind of true here, right? If you're in the top 5 spending, you should have top 5 quality. You get $14 million to spend. You better put together a roster that doesn't come with excuses. You better put together a roster that wins. You better put together a roster that fits your system perfectly. Because let's be real, it doesn't matter if I don't see $14 million worth of value on that roster if Hubert Davis does, and if that coaching staff and that front office does. Because they're the ones that have to go win with it. It's a results-based business. But there's this common timeline or sequence of events, might be the better way to put it, that we see in college basketball, that we see in college football. Coach gets a job, wins, loses, has some amount of success, whatever. But is the coach long enough that there's relationships there, that you feel like you trust them, right? It's not a hired and fired within 24 months situation. If you're around for a little bit, people get to know you. And then when you lose your job, one of the first things they say is they hint in some podcast, or they hint at their exit interview, or they hint in a athletic article. They hint that they were not given the resources that they needed to compete in modern college basketball. You start hearing about how the teams that they see as peers were spending more in NIL, and they couldn't go get the players they wanted because they couldn't afford them. And every time they walked into a recruit's room, they would start talking, and they'd build a rapport, and then they'd get to numbers, and they'd go, good luck to you, and they'd have to walk out. You'd hear that until someone else takes the job, and they either do or don't, have the amount of success. This feels like UNC looking at Hubert and Jim Tanner and everybody else involved and Sean May, everyone else involved in their coaching staff, and saying, You can't say any of that. Because if I look at last year's team, right, they're saying they tripled the amount of money they spent. I bet you R.J. Davis would have been pretty darn excited. He was the returning ACC Player of the Year. Now, whether he's worth it or not, that kind of recognition should come with a price tag. At least it seems like it would. So where's that player? Right, I know you hate to be compared to your crosstown rivals. When State appears to be spending a lot more money than they've spent in the past, they get Darian Williams, one of the top 5 incoming transfers in the entire recruiting class, and that's across like everybody. Like if you look at top 100 recruits from this cycle in transfers, he was one of the top 5.
Yeah, I mean he was a huge impact player, and they went to, I believe, the Elite 8 last year.
At Texas Tech, it was him and it was Toppin as their 2 main dudes. So where's that? Where's that? Jeff Goodman, who appears to be as connected as anyone in the NIL world, like tracking it, literally said they might be the number 2 most expensive roster in the country. And on top of that, you're UNC. I don't think, and this was a problem with the ACC, and I've talked about it before, but when the Atlantic Coast Conference was coming into the NIL world, I think they overestimated how much their cool factor was worth. Okay? They thought, yeah, sure, other teams, the SEC, the West Coast, they're going to have to spend on NIL, but we can sell them on how much money they'll make in brand by coming to play for this school, or how much money they'll make by us putting in the NBA. And it turns out it wasn't true. Players needed bottom dollar in addition to that. But I do believe it's a great tiebreaker, right? If you have 2 offers from 2 schools and they're close, one's for $400,000, one's for $430,000, right? It's close. Then you do get into, where's my brand going to grow the most? Where is the alumni network going to help me the most? Where is going to put me higher in the NBA draft? And if UNC can't say, well, you get Jordan, right? You get all the brand, cool, all of that comes with it. You have a alumni base of NBA players. You have the television, right? Like everything that comes with being at UNC, and $14 million. That should be a multiplier. Shout out to Greg Barnes of Inside Carolina. If he is right on $14 million, north of $14 million being the value of this year's roster, I mean, you ready for one of my favorite? I don't know if you've heard it, Max. It's one of my favorite sayings.
Hit me.
With great money comes great responsibility. When it's half Spider-Man, half capitalist. With great money comes great responsibility. If you give a coach $14 million to put together a roster, and the roster is not stellar at the end of the year, you look at that coach and you go, I don't know if I'm ready to give you $14 million again. Right? This goes back to like small kid time, right? When you're a little kid and you run up and you ask your mom or your dad for some money and they give you some money, and then you run back up later that day and ask for more money. What do they say? Where's the $5 I gave you earlier? If you give a coach $14 million and they come back the next year and say, hey, I need another $14, $15 million. Hey, what'd you spend the last 14 on? You better have a trophy. You better have something worth. You better have a long run into the NCAA tournament, because if not, I'm not giving you more money. Just so you can go waste it on Airheads at the snack bar again. Wait, that was flashback. You better win with $14 million is what I'm saying. You better win with $14 million. If the reporting from Inside Carolina is correct.
Just to provide a little bit of context, this is an article from CBS Sports' Matt Norlander from April. There are 8 teams or so that are around that $10 million mark for their rosters. Alongside North Carolina, there's Duke, Arkansas, BYU, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan, St. John's, and Texas Tech. So these programs either have $10 million committed already as of April, or will easily be capable of reaching that total. Obviously, those teams have added on since then, but that just gives you a context of the teams that they are kind of grouped in with when you give that level of investment.
And some of those teams have like legit crown jewels.
Yeah,
that
some
they
of those
brought
teams,
in. Like a top, and we mentioned at Texas Tech was reportedly
AJ
north of
Devanza
$4
going to BYU.
Yep. BYU. Some reports have him as high as $7 million. I don't know if I believe that. Ironically, Ian Jackson going to St. John's probably was a pretty penny, and UNC was where he left.
But when you look at that group, how much do you like North Carolina's roster versus that of Duke or Arkansas or Louisville, who hit the transfer portal really big early in the cycle?
Louisville might be the best example. I don't know if Louisville or UNC is going to be better in the ACC this year. I know Louisville will start ranked higher in the ACC. But what Louisville did feels like you spent the money and got something in return, right? They spent a bunch of money. Don't get me wrong. New coach last year, rebuilt everything. They obviously went big game hunting, and they brought in, especially they've dropped a bit in the rankings, but at the time when those commitments came into Louisville, it was like second best guard, best point guard, best shooter in the portal. They just reeled them in. It felt tangible. UNC's like, oh, that's good value. Oh, that's nice. Okay, they found I like Jaren Stevenson. I think he has the potential to be a star coming back home to Carolina, meaning to North Carolina where he played a lot of his youth ball. But that's kind of like he hasn't quite lived up to it yet. They probably got a deal on him is how I took it. If the $14 million is spent, if you're not getting a deal on him, he better be good. Vasar from Arizona, I'm like, that's a nice rim protector. You can do some things offensively. I like it. Big dude, right? 7-footer. They need that. But if you spent $3 million on him, and I don't know how much individually they spent on him, the expectation is going to be a lot higher than like, oh, that's a nice piece. You might have to be all ACC to make it work.